Hi, everyone. Welcome to the COP30 Reportback webinar. I'm very excited to be co-hosting this event today. My name is Duncan Meisel. I am the Executive Director of Clean Creatives, at least for a few more days. This is going to be a discussion about what happened in Belém, Brazil, earlier this month, last month, I should say, and what the implications are for the advertising, marketing, and PR industries. So COP30 is essentially the annual meeting of the world's leaders to talk about the progress they've made on climate change and what they'd like to do for the coming year. As you can maybe guess, there's been 30 of them, but this meeting was interesting and important for a couple reasons. First of all, is that the host country, Brazil, is a country that is committed to climate action and very interested in pursuing really advanced policies on issues related to information integrity and push to make advertising and marketing a bigger part of the discussion this year. Second, it is also what's known as a stocktake year, which is every 5 years, these meetings are focused on bigger picture questions about the direction of the economy and the energy industry and agriculture and everything related to climate change over the course of the next 5 years. It was an exciting event for a lot of reasons. It did catch fire at one point, but it also was a moment for a lot of activity and engagement on the issues related to marketing, advertising, and PR. And a bunch of the leaders who were responsible for making it such a big moment for the industry are here today. So we wanted to bring together this group because they are doing an exceptional job of pushing this conversation forward. They're helping innovate and actually helping develop policy frameworks and for governments, for companies that will help them navigate the climate emergency as it relates to marketing and advertising. So COP30 was great in a lot of ways. It was frustrating in some ways. That's how these things always tend to go, but there was some particular progress made on the issues related to communications. And so we thought it would be great to report back to the industry about what happened and what it might mean for what comes next. So I'm going to introduce my excellent co-host, Harriet Kingaby from the Conscious Advertising Network.
Cocoa has gone through the roof this year, and that climate change is a huge driver of that. For those that work on insurance brands, and for those brands working in those sectors, or in wine, or in things like beer and coffee too. So we know that fixing climate change is a huge.
Just 1 second, Harriet. People are having trouble hearing you in the stream, and so I'm just see if we can get that fixed at
Ah,
team. All right, Harriet, try again.
oh, sorry, everyone. Okay. Sorry if you've heard this before, but I was saying that so much progress has been made in 4 years since I first went to COP, and the thought leaders on this call are a huge part of that. So much has changed, and I was saying that fixing climate change is in fact business critical. So for those of us who work on who work in the sectors of insurance or coffee or chocolate, we know just how critical it is that we preserve those raw materials, and it's also a huge economic opportunity for us in the advertising sector. The UK net zero economy is growing faster than business as usual, and continues to do so. So not only is fixing climate change a huge economic opportunity, but it is also an opportunity for us to lead. And sadly, unless we are contributing to fixing these problems, fixing these issues, then we are part of the problem. And so it is with absolute pleasure that we showcase some of the real thought leaders in this space. And we invite all of you today to listen, to ask questions. We will be running a Q&A. So if you have something burning, thank you for those who submitted in advance, by the way. This is your opportunity to really explore this topic and to learn from those who are leading. And I have to say, so much progress has been made in 4 years. I'm really looking forward to next year too. And with that, I will hand over to Duncan for our first panel.
We're actually going to do our lightning round first, which you are going to facilitate.
Okay. Brilliant. So apologies. So I would like to introduce Devin Buskey from the Climate Action Against Disinformation Coalition and Jake Dubbins, who are going to be breaking down what happened at COP and also giving us a sense of what it means for the advertising industry.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Elliot and Duncan, and thank you for giving the opportunity. Uh, I will be very brief and try to explain what it means and what happened. First of all, this COP was different from the others, as this was the first time climate disinformation, its impacts, the business model that amplifies it, and the actors behind the climate disinformation was officially became one of the issues that United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement mechanism decided to solve. Information integrity was for the first time codified into this main agreement, which was signed and currently implemented by more than 190 countries. And these countries basically acknowledge the problem in the information ecosystem that leads derailing climate action through amplifying false narratives through attacks to journalists or through preventing climate information, preventing access to climate information. In addition to that decision, which is a milestone, which is the first time that we have seen in not only climate space, but beyond climate space, countries officially committed to take action against disinformation activities, their amplification, their means, and problems in the business ecosystem that leads their amplification and their access to not only vulnerable communities who are impacted by climate change, but also decision makers. So the agreement basically is a mechanism that created the Paris Agreement, and this is the first time that countries are also taking action against it. In addition to that, there was also a very clear information integrity declaration that was signed currently by 21 countries, which includes much more detailed actions. And in that actions, there are two main actions these countries committed. One is to ensure data transparency on climate change related information and build legal frameworks to protect climate truth. They also clearly have directions to the private sector. One is that ensuring transparency and human rights responsible advertising practices, and the other one is to ensure that media companies, technology companies, PR industry actors work according to the principles identified by UN on how to conduct business. I will leave it here. I think Jake will mention more in detail about how this decision can influence the business model and the current business dynamics in terms of advertising, especially.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. I have a few slides that hopefully will pop up now. But yeah, the first one here is just as has already been said, this was called the COP of Truth for the first time, and information integrity was at the core of those negotiations. This is a readout of what's called the Global Initiative for Information Integrity on Climate Change. which is chaired by the Brazilian government, the United Nations, and UNESCO, who are core partners of ours. On to the next slide, please. So as both Harriet and Devin had said, this is, 4 years ago, not many people were talking about this issue in Glasgow. And 4 years later, we have a decision within the actual outcome document. So just, I guess, how we got there. One of the things on the Global Initiative, Conscious Advertising Network, obviously who I represent, and Climate Action Against Disinformation are actually advisory group members of that global initiative, alongside the IPCC, the World Meteorological Organization, IPIE, and others. And then this is the chairs at the COP announcing the declaration. So on to the next slide, please. So there were four big moments within this COP that are relevant for information integrity and specifically then relevant for advertising. I won't, anybody who wants to see these slides can have them afterwards. But first of all, there was an open letter organized that was signed by over 400 scientists, climate leaders, and businesses. There was a formal declaration that at the time was signed by 12 countries and now 21. The COP president launched something called the Plan to Accelerate Solutions, which is going to lead up to the next COP in in Turkey, COP31. And then the information integrity language was codified into the cover text agreed by over 190 countries. On to the next slide, please. So just a little bit more detail about all of those. This was the open letter that was launched by scientists, business leaders from renewable energy, faith leaders, legal experts, as well as Brazilian civil society and other civil society C40 cities as well. And so it asked for the COP to unequivocally recognize that upholding information integrity is a prerequisite for effective climate action. Next slide. Moment two was this declaration, which was then signed, as we said, by 12 governments straight off the bat. This is a picture of everyone from a prince of the Netherlands to ministers and ambassadors. And just a quick piece of the language that is specifically relevant to advertising there. It says to promote and to support the sustainability of the media ecosystem. And then finally it says, on climate and environmental issues, as well as policies on advertising transparency and accountability. Next slide, please. Now, this one is a really long one. I really want to draw your attention to, I'm not going to go through all of this. We do not have time. The second to last one, this is the Plan to Accelerate Solutions from the COP presidency on information integrity. And they've asked for an advancing corporate accountability by creating a charter for accountable climate advertising and securing adoption by the private sector. And that includes statements on healthy incentives, oversight, data availability, supply chain transparency, and client disclosure. And then finally, the moment four was, as Devin has said, the codification of information integrity into the final document. It's quite kind of a funny thing. 4 years work to get 3 words into an agreement of 190 plus countries is quite something. But there it is. I will stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. 3 very important words, however. So I'd like to invite Shweta up next to talk about your work.
Thank you, Harriet, and good evening from where I am. My name is Shweta Narayan. I'm the campaign lead at the Global Climate and Health Alliance. And as you can already hear from report back from Devin and Jake, that this COP30 was different, and we saw a very meaningful step forward in how global community understands climate disinformation. That it is a systematic strategy tied to fossil fuel marketing machinery in deflecting and delaying climate action, and countries have made progress in calling out that disinformation. From the health community, I am very, very happy and proud to share that the health community also played a very significant role in changing this narrative and in working towards information integrity, and also exposing the role of advertising and PR sector and the role that they play in climate disinformation on behalf of the fossil fuel industry. So how did we shift this frame? We, from the health community, helped change this narrative by presenting evidence from hospitals, from research and pollution studies, from the bringing the lived experience of frontline communities living under the shadow of fossil fuel harm, and bringing the health voices to make it clear that fossil fuel communications aren't neutral. They influence public understanding of risk, delay protective policies, and ultimately shape health outcomes. So by reframing fossil fuel marketing as detrimental to health, as determinants of health, we strengthen the demand for governance and accountability, which the information integrity work underpins. And one of the biggest milestones that I'm very proud to share, that we also shared at the COP platform, that as part of our initiative, which is called Break the Fossil Influence Campaign, over 120 health organizations have now made a commitment not to engage with PR and ad agencies associated with fossil fuel industry and their disinformation machinery. Now, this is important because in May this year, when we launched this campaign, we had 30 organizations. And in 6 months, we have had a 4-fold increase, and that's telling. That's telling of a momentum. That's telling that an industry, the health community is organizing and is going to assert its power to influence the way we communicate about climate risks and about fossil fuels. So absolutely clear that the health community is not backing out. It's strengthening the case for oversight, for accountability, and it's bringing its credibility to the table to reframe this conversation. Quickly, what does that mean in terms of what is the path ahead for us? We'll continue to ensure that fossil fuel disinformation is consistently recognized as a threat to public health and human rights. We'll support institutions, particularly the health systems, to adopt fossil-free procurement and ethical communications policies, and we'll continue to contribute into evidence building and engagement with government, with industry actors, to ensure that fossil fuel disinformation is curbed, probably even bring more restrictions on, say, fossil fuel advertising. Our purpose is very clear. We'll keep moving from awareness to accountability, from voluntary commitments to durable safeguards that support health and a fossil-free future. And for me, I think the message is very clear. The time to join this growing momentum is now. Otherwise, we'll see you.
Thank you, Shweta. Really powerful call to action there, and really interesting for those for agencies as well who might have health clients, that this is such a big movement within that international community. Flo, I'd like to invite you up next to talk about your work.
Well, thank you so much, Duncan and Harriet, and all the panelists for this excellent event. I have a few slides that will hopefully appear on the screen now. But to help accelerate the decarbonisation of the advertising industry, we attended COP30 to launch a blueprint designed to help advertising agencies, media owners phase out their fossil fuel advertising with confidence. So the blueprint is a business strategy rooted in the commercial realities of the sector. It argues for a controlled, measured approach that creates no disruption to operations or to growth. Is really focused on progress, not perfection. So it gives a roadmap to take steps. It's also developed so that people across all seniority levels can get involved, and it encourages collaboration across departments to ensure a smooth operation. So these are the principles of the blueprint. Next slide, please. And really, the blueprint introduces the concept of the 5 levers of change to phase out fossil fuel advertising, because they represent the 5 functions that are present in every kind of business and that need to be engaged to deliver a controlled transition away from fossil fuels. And these are finance, legal and compliance, the board, internal culture, and operations. And the idea is they function as levers, right? So they don't need to be activated linearly. So every business will be able to identify where to start best in the process. But they are interconnected in the sense that progress on one lever unlocks progress in another one. And that progress is also scalable. So the blueprint offers guidance for each lever. So you have the ability to do quick, get some quick wins and get some longer term actions to engage with. So next slide, please. The blueprint gives you guidance so you can identify how much of your revenue depends on fossil fuel clients. You can understand how to engage your legal team to develop a compliant phase out, and to also influence the board on the material risks and the opportunities of a phase out. It helps you with how to support your staff who might be currently working on fossil fuel clients and how to help them transition away from them into new sectors. And it also it helps you with understanding how to adapt your operations so the business is ready for a fossil-free future. You can download the blueprint by scanning the QR code or visiting our website at climatelabs.org. But yeah, very happy to be sharing it with everyone. And the reception at COP30 of the blueprint was really good, and we're hoping that it will accelerate the change in the industry.
Fantastic. Thank you, Flo, because that's the argument we hear so often, isn't it? That actually agencies can't transition away because they'll lose jobs. And it's great to hear that there's such a concrete plan and that it's been received so well. Next, I'd like to invite Lucy Shea. Please join us.
Thanks, Harriet. I'm Lucy Shea. I'm the CEO of Futera, and I'm also the interim exec director of Futera Solutions Union, which is an independent non-profit set up by Futera. So I couldn't be more delighted to join this panel. It really felt like an honour and a privilege to be at COP this year with many of you. And it's, again, such an honour to join these wonderful thought leaders on what happened. So for me, COP felt a little bit like a game of two halves. So the brilliant focus on information integrity spread even further. So I was very honoured to co-moderate the COP presidency event on ACE, which is Action for Climate Empowerment. And in terms of how COP works and how these things build over time, ACE is quite a good example of that. So it's laid down in Article 12 of the Paris Agreement that governments must encourage public empowerment and bring their communities on the way with them on climate action, basically. It's also in Article 7 of the Convention, and now there's an annual event on action for climate empowerment mandated in the Glasgow Work Programme. So that was COP28, I think. And the theme this year was information integrity for the very first time. So we had this amazing event with wonderful speakers from the UN and the wider ecosystem, all looking at how you link information integrity with wider public empowerment. And the expertise in the room was absolutely fantastic. And what you may not know as well is there's COP negotiators on public empowerment. So I think this real push on information integrity is going to give those negotiators much more to chew on, if you like, in the coming years. So that's great to see. Secondly, and in fact, if we bring the slides back, I was there with Solutions Union launching this very, very tiny toolkit on effective climate narratives, because as many here, I'm sure, know, this deluge of misinformation and fossil fables, as it's been known, has meant that the public faces these three very big plot holes in the climate story. One of sacrifice, a very well designed over story saying that climate action will be worse, basically, that you will have to sacrifice your lifestyle or sacrifice, your job or whatever it may be. And that is overridingly the sentiment that people feel. Secondly, a feeling of helplessness, that you can't make a difference, that no matter what you do, your personal action is not relevant or doesn't contribute. And thirdly, general fatalism. 1 in 5 young people, and this is now rising, as a climate fatalist, this feeling that it's too little, too late. And these are not accidental plot holes. These have been designed and pushed forward. So if we go to the next slide, over 25 years at Futera, we've gifted our IP to Solutions Union and also done this enormous, extensive review of the evidence base out there, the global evidence base, on what are the effective narrative frames. And so this is for community groups and NGOs, but also for those that work in the advertising and communications industry to kind of hold on to what you know. You know an audience first approach works. You know that linking to what audience benefits by is the way to sell things. And so that's what this toolkit is about. It basically takes a psychographic approach to audiences. And also what you'll see on the slide, there's the eight, it's 101, but the 8 established frames that will work when telling a story on climate change, from awe in nature to economic empowerment, personal agency, etc. And so if you go on to the next slide, just a little sneaky peek of what you will see in that toolkit is it's taken this entire piece and boiled it down to a few audience cards, 3, and then 8 narrative frames, and how you use them and who they work best with. And so you use them to unstick a campaign, to, develop a new campaign, etc. And final slide just shows the breakdown there. So, my call, I know I'll come on to this at the end, is for the advertising and comms industry. We need you to sell the solutions and to remember what you know best, your years of experience in this field.
Fantastic, thank you. And as someone who's had to tell many climate stories over the years, like that kind of framework is just so important. And actually, that's going to make sure that, I mean, a big part of ensuring, and for those that we didn't do a definition of information integrity up front, actually, which we probably should have done, but it really is about the quality out there in the information ecosystem. And we know that the quality is quite bad at the moment, and that consumers are really confused. We've all had pub conversations. We all know that people aren't really feeling the clarity in what they can do and the power behind that. So that is so important in telling that story. That storytelling element is so important, and something we are so well equipped to take on. Brilliant. Thank you, Lucy. Next, I'm going to introduce Jonathan.
Oh, thanks very much.
Welcome.
Thanks, Harriet. Hi, everybody. I've got some charts as well. My name is Jonathan Wise, and I'm co-founder of Purpose Disruptors, which is a not-for-profit based in the UK. Our mission is that the industry's output only promotes lifestyles, values, and behaviours that encourage citizens to live within planetary boundaries. And a way that we do that, one of the projects that I lead is on advertising service emissions. So first chart, please. Oh, okay. Okay. So service emissions was a framework created by the UN Race to Zero and Oxford Net Zero. And service emissions were intended to apply to kind of all professional service providers. So be that kind of management consultants, lawyers, advisors, engineers, architects, and of course, advertising firms and PR. And service emissions are defined as the greenhouse gas emissions that arise from or impacted by client activities that are informed by the services sold by that organization. So if you're McKinsey and you're working on an oil and gas program to get that contract made, then if you're McKinsey, then you should be responsible for the emissions associated with that oil and gas program when it gets up and running, because your contribution helped make that happen, and it wouldn't have happened without your contribution. Similarly, if you're an advertising agency and you're helping sell a bunch more cars, and you can prove that the incremental sales of those cars was caused by the advertising, then those emissions of making and running those cars are on you. And so what advertising service emissions does is it shifts the conversation about climate impact from operational emissions, the small circle, which is just sort of servers and the businesses and the production of the advertising, into a much larger realm. And that is thinking about the client work that we do, the type of work we do, and the services that we offer. And so service emissions is basically a kind of 6 actions that allow organizations to make the transition from the kind of the services they offer at the moment, which may well be kind of serving the existing economy, the high carbon economy, and transitioning those services towards client work that serves the low carbon economy. And those 6 actions are strategy and vision. So develop a strategy and vision to recognize, understand, and reduce your service emissions as part of your commitment to hitting the net zero economy. So strategy and vision, governance, integrate climate into due diligence and risk, which is something we've already heard of at the top of the call here. Invest in your client and relationships and support them in their transition. 5th is measurement and tracking. And then 6th is advocate for systems change. And then what has happened at COP is that we announced our new report from Purpose Disruptors, which was called Beyond the Chaos, Ahead of the Curve. And what this did is it's a really extensive report which shows that you can carry that theory, that kind of that sort of mental model of change, and actually it can be applied. So the case study, there's 2 case studies in there from 2 global advertising agencies, both Elvis and Amplify, and we take them through the case of how they've actually started applying all of those 6 action areas to their businesses to show how they're being more competitive and how they're succeeding in being able to think more strategically and shifting their organization to be in service of a net zero economy, and the clients are going with them on that. So yeah, also the report is framed around risk. Again, as we said at the top, the importance of risk as a lens to see climate through, because that is a kind of board level conversation, and therefore it graduates the conversation from just the kind of sustainability teams up into the board level. So it's hope you get a chance to read it and see how advertising organizations can shift the business and the business model and the client work to be in service of a sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. You did amazingly without your slides. But I just think that framing is so good. You know, bringing clarity to the chaos, because this is such turbulent times, and making change is never easy. So again, great framework for change. And I'm going to introduce Maria.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Harriet and Duncan, for having us here. And I'm very pleased to be reunited with all these incredible panelists, and to be one of the few panelists that's still here in Brazil. So I'm the strategic advisor for Creatives for Climate, one of the largest movements of communicators turning the power of creative influence into a force for climate action. We have over 7,000 creatives across the globe, across 90 different countries, from agencies, brands, NGOs, you name it. So if you pull up our slides, you've heard from all the different panelists who have spoken. There's a lot of firsts about this COP. So we've talked about it being the COP of truth, the COP of implementation, the first COP where misinformation and information integrity was integrated into the agenda. It was also the first year that culture was a part of the action agenda, which is really a recognition that how we create and how we communicate really shapes how fast we move on climate. So if you can pull up the slides, hopefully they will work. It's okay. 1 second. Great. So if you think about, you know, the types of conversations that are happening at COP around creativity, you could really, you know, bucket into what you've been hearing from the other panelists today. There's a part of it that's around how do we do less harm. So this is really about tackling misinformation, decarbonizing the industry. But then it's also, you know, just as equally important that we're talking about how do we do more good? How do we shift narratives? How do we mobilize communities, create new stories, and empower people to do more good? So that's really aligned with our approach at Creatives for Climate, and it embodies how we showed up at COP. One thing I also want to mention is the unprecedented civic participation at this COP that was in large part rooted into how the Brazilian government structured the mutirão and the action agenda. And I think when we talk about the people who are on this call, this is really a call to all of you who work in creativity and all of the agencies to really take this upon yourself to adopt these toolkits, adopt these frameworks to accelerate action. So within the action agenda, for those of you who weren't at COP or got confused by all of the different acronyms and numbers, there were 30 key objectives that were identified. And one of those objectives, Action Area 19, was specifically around how culture is a lever for transformation. And so Creatives for Climate is proud to be co-leading two initiatives within that action area. One really around shifting narratives and the power of creativity, and one really around decarbonizing the creative industry. And I think the important thing to note is that the work happens before and after COP. During COP, it's all a mad dash and, everybody's exhausted and running from one place to the other. But there's an incredible amount of work from our partners and our coalition members to design these plans to accelerate solutions. And I think now the real work really starts as well to how do we take these plans to accelerate solutions forward and continue to implement them and scale them out in the world. So for us, one of the biggest highlights at COP was launching our Creative Integrity Playbook on the COP presidential stage, and it really builds on the service emissions framework that Jonathan was explaining. So within this playbook, people can discover the agency integrity curve that is, a step-by-step model guiding agencies from commitment into action and from, being at the beginning of their journey to really being pioneers. There's case studies from across the globe of how different agencies are implementing this. There's policy priorities of how do we ensure these frameworks get incorporated into legal action. And then lastly, one of the things that we also showed on stage is the ethical agency show reel. Again, it's just as important that we're encouraging people and giving the frameworks to do less harm, but also that we're really showing what good looks like. And our ethical agency show reel included a message from Benedict Cumberbatch and, swinging plastic anatomy and all really showing world-class work from fossil fuel free agencies on this big stage and empowering people around, the kind of work that can happen when we embed these types of frameworks into the agencies that we run. So excited to see more and more agencies being inspired by this work and downloading our toolkit as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Maria. And the old saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, it's such an important part of this work is to embed it within culture. Thank you so much to our panel. That was inspiring and really, really interesting. So we're gonna I think we're gonna start by having by asking the panel a few questions, and I think I'll hand over to Duncan now.
Yes. Okay, great. So we want to just have like a few directed conversations just to dive in a little bit more to some of these things because there's great collaboration happening across this network. So first of all, I wanted to follow up with Devin and Jake. So in light of the statement that was included on, or the statement on climate information integrity, what do you think the progress means for legislation? So COP is sort of a moment where governments come together and says, we'd like to do this. When are you sort of expecting, and what are you sort of expecting to see from governments actually implementing it? And Jake, in particular, it'd be good to get your insight on how the ad industry could be preparing for more legislative or regulatory action.
Duncan, it's a very tough question, but we need to acknowledge that this is the first time governments say they want to have legislation on these issues particularly. And I think we do have also a lot of role to follow up about what they want to do. But looking at last 4 or 5 years in terms of legislation in Europe, in all around world, I think we do have pretty good chance that existing legislations or existing processes for legislations in terms of advertising, information integrity ecosystem, or digital spaces, we can expect that climate change will be at least start to mention in all those documents. For instance, right after COP, we already know that Council of Europe started the consultations, and there are now some non-governmental organizations working with Council of Europe in terms of discussing information integrity and climate. So I think we will see lots of stories about how new legislation started to discuss about climate action and protecting climate action against climate disinformation.
Hey, yeah, and just to build on that, I mean, specifically for the advertising sector, I mean, this sector is a trillion-dollar industry, and it funds our information ecosystems globally, right? So it obviously funds the free tools that everybody uses, but it also funds, you know, as we said, climate denial, climate disinformation. It's based on a sort of the attention economy. So the more of us on tech platforms and on online for longer, the more advertising can be shown to us all. But it's a very opaque system. So very big brands do not know that their adverts are appearing adjacent to and therefore funding everything from extreme weather disinformation, so effectively encouraging people that are victims of extreme weather not to trust rescuers, not to trust people coming to give them food. You know, and brands don't know they're doing that. And it's not just on extreme weather, it's, you know, general denial, but across the board, it's things like vigilante violence, it's suicide and self-harm content as well. You know, so Shweta talked about, you know, the health community, for example. You know, people's lives are being put at risk, and that is being monetized online. So that is the attention economy. So I think from a legislative point of view, it's really important that there is a transparent supply chain. We have that in most other supply chains. You know, supply chains aren't perfect globally, but they're a lot better than the advertising supply chain. You know, it's very, very opaque. Obviously, it's a benefit to advertisers. And we know of very big advertisers who have demanded transparency and actually taken control of their supply chain that are actually doing a lot better commercially and are seeing better results for their advertising by demanding that transparency. And I guess just finally, I want to close, you know, by also saying that, you know, this isn't just us talking about this. There was a piece written in the Financial Times yesterday saying that these crises are not going away. It is sobering thought that what we're experiencing now could be the most stable the climate will be for the rest of our lives. More extreme weather, more disruption, and more climate shock, they're baked in, the new reality. And food industry boards must ensure that the businesses on which their consumers depend are creating a sustainable, resilient, and stable food system. If we can no longer grow food, what will their companies sell? And those are the advertising industry clients. That was not, you know, some random activist. That was Dave Lewis, the incoming CEO of Diageo, who used to be the CEO of Tesco. So I think this is highly relevant to the advertising industry to get their house in order from a transparency point of view, but also for legislators to take action too.
Thank you. Harriet.
That's powerful stuff. I was joking about chocolate on our biscuits earlier on, but you know, it's really sobering. So my questions are for Lucy, Shay, Flo, and Shweta. You all made a case for actually this movement of clients away from potentially from agencies who have other, you know, kind of have fossil fuel clients as well. And Flo, you made a very practical case for you know, for how agencies can move away from this. I mean, this could actually threaten the business model of agency groups if enough clients did make this shift. And do you think this is the start of a groundswell? And why, if the economic case is as strong as it looks in Flo's report for switching away, why aren't more agencies making the move now? I'm going to pick on Shweta to start.
I could go first.
Yes. Shweta might have frozen. We'll take Lucy to start.
Thanks, Harriet, and then I'll pass it.
Right. Well, I'm I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
We can now. Yeah.
Am I audible? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sorry for the disruption. actually there's incessant rains that's affecting our internet. Unusual for this time, but this is the reality that we live in. As I was saying, from a health perspective, when major health clients walk away from agencies tied to fossil fuel polluters, it's a direct challenge to the business model, and it is a beginning of a groundswell. We are making sure, and we are sending a message that the agencies or business models that profits from harm is not acceptable. And this is not new. We have seen this before, and health community has led when it remember tobacco, and health community exposed the tactics of big tobacco. Advertising agencies dropped cigarette clients not because it was not profitable, because the legal and the reputational risks were untenable. And that's the same shift is underway right now. The economic case is already strong. The hesitation is not because of financial issues, because of the failure to recognize the legal, reputational risks and the fact that promoting fossil fuels is as toxic as tobacco. So I think from our side, the message is absolutely clear that people's lives comes before polluters' profit. And the agencies that are acting now are the ones that will survive and do well and succeed in future.
Powerful stuff. Lucy or Flo, who would like to go next?
Shall I jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from the Futura perspective, I mean, agencies are moving, not enough, but agencies are moving. The kind of ecosystem moves we see, such as that Shweta outlined, health organisations committing not to work with agencies who work with fossil fuels is really helpful. We see it in RFPs at Futura. We have our requests for proposals that say, we want to know that you don't work with fossil fuel clients. We've pioneered a thing called the Client Disclosure Report that many agencies have signed up to. It's very linked to part of the service emissions approach that Jonathan and others have spoken to. But it is a tricky time, and there has been a brand drop-off in interest in talking about sustainability, and that in some markets, not in all markets. We've got teams in Mexico who are happy working away still, but there's been a big drop-off in interest. And I'll say something slightly controversial. The very unfortunate demise of the Green Claims Directive might actually loosen things up again for brand communications on sustainability. And it's not going to last forever. We go in these boom busts with sustainability communications. And right now we're in a bit of a bust, but I've lived through 3 of them already. It will boom again. So I think really agencies, and there's many strong signals, Shweta talked some, they're all in Flo, I'm sure will continue on, but the fossil fuel ad bans are on the horizon. And I think for agencies to move now, but also to prepare themselves for the upswing that is going to be coming, so to avoid those legal and reputational risks and actually still build that skill and capability in order to do effective sustainability and climate communications. And there's many industries as well which haven't hit this down cycle, healthcare, for example, which Duncan has mentioned in his off-ramping report. So yeah, I think it's going to continue to move. It is tricky times, but it will continue to move.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lucy. And Flo?
Yeah, I think the conditions for groundswell are building because the blueprint research and all of the research done through the off-ramp report from Clean Creative shows that the drivers for change are really powerful and they are very commercially relevant. But at the same time, I totally agree with Lucy's point that the context is really important, and right now is very tricky in the advertising industry. There's a massive merger going on right now. There are layoffs, AI threats. That's just kind of making everyone go into a defensive mindset. And agencies feel like they will be punished if they kind of like act alone. But I think it will just take one network, one of the big ones, to do it, to take action on phasing out their fossil fuel clients and say, we are going to keep working on what makes us great, but we're just going to say no to this particular type of client moving forward. It would just take one to then catalyze the rest of the industry. It's just the question is, who will take that leadership opportunity? Because if you pair that up with the very good point that Shweta is raising in terms of the conflict of interest, then it becomes a real opportunity, because if clients start reviewing their agency relationships and they say, oh, we're actually working with agencies and media owners that promote fossil fuel clients, and that is actually threatening our own business, then that is probably gonna contribute to making the advertising industry get a little bit nervous. So hoping that those two things align, that there is change that comes from within the industry, that somebody takes that leadership opportunity, and also that clients really insert their own pressure into the issue.
Fabulous. Thank you. So there's a mixture of carrots and sticks there, but a real leadership opportunity. Duncan, I'll hand over to you.
Great. So this is going to be our final kind of question, for prepared question, and then we're going to have a few from the audience. If you're watching on YouTube, you can ask your question in the chat. So this is a question for Jonathan and Maria. You've been working closely. One of the things I love about Purpose Disruptors and Creatives for Climate is how closely you work with professionals in agencies on developing platforms like service emissions. Particularly when it comes to service emissions, how did those conversations with agencies shape the proposals and the frameworks you developed? And what advice would you give to agencies who are just getting started with measuring their total carbon emissions?
Yeah, thanks, Duncan. I'll go first. Sorry, Maria and I said that I go first. We had the advertising emissions working group that we've been running as Purpose Disruptors for about 4 years now, and that features leading kind of global agencies. I think we've got 4 of the 6 holding groups represented in that, and major media owners as well. So they have helped shape the advertising emissions methodology that we use, and also they kind of help shape the response that's fed back into the Oxford University, Oxford Net Zero, because they on the ground have basically taken that theory into practice, and we've created a feedback loop that then influences back into Oxford. So I think that it's both a really good representation or demonstration of how kind of academia and academic rigor are linking and transferring information to industry, and therefore feeding back into academia as well with our partner University of Portsmouth. So I think this is a very interesting thing. So it shows how it can both be theoretically sound and practically deliverable. And I think from an advertising emissions point of view, so in our recent study, sort of one of the agencies, their advertising emissions were like 42 times higher than their operational emissions, which demonstrates the size of the extra emissions and extra emissions associated with the consumption that they drive.
Thanks, Jonathan. And just building on that, and I think taking a bit of stock on, the importance of the conversation and how it's evolved. Up until recently, emission consequences of creative influence and the service industry in general have largely been absent from the dominant thinking, from global standards, and what businesses are measuring. So that means that agencies are looking to reduce their operational emissions, but not necessarily like changing the types of ideas that they're propagating into the world, which arguably has as Jonathan was mentioning, has an exponential consequence. So what's really exciting about where we're at now is that there's a lot more clarity around not just what needs to stop, but also what climate aligned advice and like campaigns can actually look like with this inspiration from pioneering agencies. So when you look at the work that Purpose Disruptors has done, establishing the methodology behind our advertised emissions, our work at Creatives for Climate is really complementary to that, because you've got the measurements, and then we're helping give people the tools to do action, the shared language, the forums for systemic collaboration across agencies. So we really work hand in hand alongside each other. And so since late last year, Creatives for Climate has been working with our Ethical Agency Alliance, which has, agencies across 10 different markets to really translate the six action areas of the service emissions framework into, what are agencies already doing? How are they implementing it? And a lot of this is, new things that agencies need to do, but it's really taking agencies who are already doing and putting that into this framework and creating the evidence of where do we need to go next. So our creative integrity playbook is a translation of those learnings, and the aim is to really democratize this journey for anybody who wants to go through it. And since launching it at COP, we've already had 15 pieces of media coverage around the globe, 450 downloads. We've been included in the COP30 action agenda. So in the ask of, how do agencies and individuals get involved, it's really about taking a look, downloading that toolkit, joining our Ethical Agency Alliance, and working alongside the pioneering agencies that are leading the way, and seeing, where you are in that journey and how you can start.
Great. So we're going to go to audience Q&A right now, considering we're coming up on our hour. And actually, the first question is for Ria and Jonathan, I think. So we can go back to our three panel if we want. Someone just asked, who can we reach out to for guidance on measuring advertising emissions from an agency perspective? There's some people who are working out their methodology to do that. What's the best door to knock on?
The best door to knock on is my door, and my email is jonathan at purposedisruptors.org, and we can help you with that. And we're really keen for agencies to be able to calculate this, and as Maria's saying, kind of assist people to make this happen. So yeah, get in touch with me. We'd be delighted to kind of give you a hand with that and see what we can do to help. You could
And
also
echoing
as well.
Yeah, just CC me in your email to Jonathan. No, but in all seriousness, you can reach out to our team at Creatives for Climate, to our founder, Lucy at creativesforclimate.co. But I think also, joining something like the Ethical Agency Alliance puts you in direct touch with other agencies that are going through that journey. So I'd encourage anybody on the call to do that as well.
Great. So I actually have a question for Harriet, my co-host. There was a question in the chat about how we're talking about sort of information integrity, media ecosystems. What is the impact of this on publishers? How can we make sure that publishers who are providing excellent, high integrity climate information are being supported and funded well by the ad industry?
Great question. And so, we have a really big problem with the funding of safe climate content. If you are a brand, you may have climate words on your block lists, or you may be inadvertently setting up risk profiles, which means you're not against climate content. We really urge you to remove those words from your block lists, and also to talk to your brand safety providers about, actively wanting to be funding that safe content. When we ran a study a few years ago now, and we found that around 70% of the really good quality news on this stuff is unmonetizable through advertising. So those would be the things. And I think also if you should be thinking about inclusion lists as well. Think really, really mindfully about where you show up, and as much as possible, be asking your partners and vendors for information about where your advertising is being placed. If you're on the open web, if you're in, kind of on platforms, but also the creators that you're appearing next to. Because again, we found incidences of brands appearing on creator content, which is really quite contrary to their brand values. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Great. And then I have a question that I think touches on things that both Shweta and Flo have brought up, which was just the question was asked, is it time for a just transition of the whole ad industry? And to me, I think just transition touches on two issues. Like one is that the industry that's being transitioned maintains its workforce. People are not being forced out of work by a climate transition. And so Flo, I feel like this is a question about kind of revenue and the work that you've done in collaboration with Clean Creatives and to act together. It's one of my favorite things we've worked on together is developing kind of the financial framework for how the transition could happen. And then Shweta, I feel like anytime we're talking about just transition, we kind of have to talk about the immediate health impacts of fossil fuels, like the communities who are on the fence lines, who are on the front lines of dealing with pollution impacts are really significant. So I think it would be interesting, it'd be good to get your perspective and GCHA's perspective on kind of health and what a transition would look like in that context as well. So Shweta, you're on screen, so I'll let you start.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, the key word in this phrase, just transition, is just. That means we are not replacing one form of operations with another, but we are centering justice, equity, right in the middle of this conversation. So when we're talking about just transitions away from fossil fuels, we're not changing one form of energy with another form of energy, but we are actually ensuring that the historical injustices are reversed and not repeated. And the same goes for in the ad industry. When we're talking about transition, we're talking about centering ethics and integrity, which is core to any business. It's an opportunity, of course, because the tide is changing. We are talking about a fossil-free future. We're talking about making sure that people who have borne the most severe burden of the fossil economy and the injustices, they are done. I mean, right. Things are done right by them, but at the same time, if we want to make sure that this practice is institutionalized, we have to center ethics, justice, integrity in our work. And as I said, now is the moment. Now is the moment to show the way in the future.
Thanks, Shweta. And if I can add something to that, I totally agree that the just transition means also taking care of your people and your workforce, and also developing the right support and for those people that are going to need to transition away from maybe an expertise that they have developed on the energy industry into new industries is very important. And so we have really good advice on the blueprint from people who have done it, from people who have put things in place so that their workforce has been able to transition in a smooth way. And I also just want to say that phasing out fossil fuel clients does not mean does not require a full business transformation. It does not mean walking away from what makes your agency successful. It just means focusing on other types of client that allow you to engage in a just transition from a revenue perspective as well as a workforce perspective.
Thank you both. I'll pass to Harriet to wrap us up.
Wow, thank you, everybody. And thank you for staying with us for an hour and listening to some quite technical things. But I think if I was just going to recap, we've heard that there is huge multilateral agreement around the importance of information integrity, and particularly around climate. We've heard that the advertising industry is being called on to respond not only by clients, but also by internal thought leaders. We've heard from frameworks for action, frameworks for how you can support information integrity, and we've also heard that actually the rewards for doing so will be huge, not just from a client, but also from an employee and talent perspective. So thank you so much to all of our speakers. This has been incredibly informative. Thank you for sticking with us. So there will be a wrap-up email that will go out at the end of this. There will be so where you can get all the information that you need about what to do next, because something I'm taking away from this is that there are some really concrete next steps. We can all investigate these initiatives, we can read these reports, and we can work out exactly what the next steps are for us. So just a massive thank you, and take care.